So what then happens is that the buyers are coming after the association and the management company saying, you know, and so we're seeing more and more of this. 360 Southwood was built in a really great time for those of you who bought years ago. So you're going to see more and more people renting their units as opposed to selling their units. So Playa Vista sees a lot of that, and so most associations in Playa Vista are those associations that Jasmine talks about that are looking to update their CC&Rs to include these rental caps.
So if we could then move to the series of section 2.4, there's about 4 or 5 articles. Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, let me add on something as, that piggybacks off of Brad. It's the challenge, if you guys get past a certain percentage, the challenge isn't just for people who are buying. The challenge is also going to be for people who are looking to refinance, right? Just because you own in here, just because you already live here and you have a lot of equity, if something happens with the HOA where the amount of tenants exceed the amount of homeowners, or you know, Fannie, Freddie changed their ruling where now they're going back to 70-30 and you guys are upside down on that figure, that basically means that you guys can't refinance into a conventional loan. It's not to say that you couldn't refinance ever, just saying you can't refinance into a conventional loan where that's where you get your best interest rates from. So it will impact you guys, not just the people who are looking to buy here. And I thought that was just worth mentioning to you.
So the first article here with 2.4.1 talks about a residency requirement. And what we're proposing is that a owner own the unit for a period of 12 months before they rent or lease, with exceptions for circumstances involving inheritance, trust, and hardships, and procedures on applying for hardship. And again, the basis is to increase owner occupancy, again, as you've heard, to stabilize the community and so on and so forth. So this is a bit of a rehash of things we've said. But that second bullet is, again, intended to provide an outlet, a safety valve, or whatever you want to consider it, if circumstances occur that you want to bring to the board involving, I've lived here a month, I need to, you know, rent my unit, or whatever it might be. So that's what 2.4.1 is. And as we go through these, I'd ask you to just notate questions, come back when we go through these, and then ask the questions. So we're not going to do these one section at a time because we'll lose control of what this is about. But the idea is to go through these and then come back and begin with an open forum of questions. So 2.4.2 is a minimum lease term, and the idea is 12-month minimum lease terms. This has been one of those areas that we've got a lot of feedback on, and it revolves around issues of lease breaks or the person bails out. We would certainly hope that everybody has a appropriate lease agreement which provides for them to be able to make themselves whole. So in this case, what we're suggesting is a 12-month period, and that if you have somebody leave after 6 months or 3 months, you pursue them legally to collect the remaining rent item, I think, for a lot of people. People are very emotional about it. We understand that. People feel there may be issues in taking away their rights. We believe, based upon, again, inputs we receive, as well as survey results, that this 25% is a number that allows us to maintain the community that many people want. So I don't think there's too much I can say beyond that. You see the reasons we're doing it with the 2 bullets, again, with exemptions. And this applies under the concept of new owners after the amendment takes place. Grandfathering means that if you own up to the day the amendment is recorded, you're grandfathered. You can always rent your unit. As long as you own it, you can rent it. So the point being is that nobody here is affected from renting their unit in the future. If you
care of, the board will have to maybe hear hearings on hardships and things like that. Now, speaking for the board, I think we are willing and capable of taking on that workload. How about management? Is this something that concerns you?
No, I mean, it's something that's, like I said, I see in documents. The management of leases, lots of documents require, lots of CC&Rs require that management be provided copies of leases. So then we take on the administrative task of actually keeping track of the lease terms and making sure once those lease terms are up, we follow up with the owner about new lease terms. So no, I mean, all of this as far as the administrative function of tracking the leases and something very typical. Our software allows for it also.
Okay, 2.5.1 talks about operating a business. Another, I think, very confused topic among some people. This is not changing anybody's opportunity to have a consulting business or a services type business or anything of that nature, which is routinely signed by the HOA, generally for the City of Hawthorne license and other needs. What we are doing is we're reinforcing certain aspects of the CC&Rs, one of which is Airbnb, the second of which are things that involve intrusion upon quality of life, like manufacturing, vending. We've heard there is a person who runs a motorcycle repair business in the garage, things of that nature. So those kinds of things will obviously be prohibited. I also know that there's some obviously very concerned comments about Airbnb. We really do not have an Airbnb problem. Despite what you believe, what you hear, what you read, it is not an issue in this community. We monitor that stuff. There are times when things which are very difficult to prove. So if you see a constant turnover of somebody coming into a unit, we do investigate it, but if that person gives us anything reasonably plausible, we can't prove otherwise in some cases. There are very few of those situations, probably 2 or 3 that we're aware of routinely. From the police, except us. They show up with their checks and so on and so forth. That was the intent of this bullet. We'll see if it, stays.
Well, I can add to that. Hawthorne, like all the other local cities, have neighborhood night out. And all of the other HOAs in the city of Hawthorne, there's like 7 or 8 of them. There's some about our size, neighborhood associations like Holly Glen. What they do is they have a booth set up, and they have to pay a fee for a booth, and you advertise your association. It's like a way of entertaining your community to the city. And if there's a charge, and in the past, a lot of the presidents that before Neil or stuff had to take their money out of their own pocket, $20 to $60. But if this is one of those things besides the police department, where you'd be allowed, we could entertain, set up, and join as 360 Association into the neighborhood night out, which every city around here has them, like I said.
Okay, next one. 5.3.1 Design Review Committee deals with the aspect of sound within predominantly what we call stacked units, that'd be flats and lofts, and deals with the aspect of the noise that transmits between units. And the intent of this is that when this amendment passes, if you change your floor, you must go through the Design Review Committee and it must be approved. which is going to have noise standards. If you're currently in your unit, you're grandfathered in. You do not have to make a change to your flooring. If people above you complain or below you complain, it's a reality or fact of life. Jasmine, what do you think?
So I think it's important that everyone understands, if this amendment were passed, number one, it's obviously not applicable to William Lyon installed flooring. This is about after someone has purchased. If someone didn't go through the design review process, they're not covered regardless of whether they installed it pre or post, adoption of this. And, this is something, Brad can probably speak to it as well, that every HOA that I deal with that has stacked condos and even townhouse units grapples with sound transmission. And it's, unfortunate that we've got issues here, and this is a way that the board is trying to balance people's desire to nicely decorate their homes with the person who lives below them or next to them and says, these people make me miserable, I have an elephant next to me. It's pretty common.
Very
And when coming up with these, I remember we reached out to you to get some consultation.
We talked with Vanna Clausen. It's a nationally and internationally known acoustical sound testing expert. They're in Santa Monica. We talked with different flooring installers. Bill was helpful enough to tell us some of the construction realities in the flats, at least with your gypcrete, instead of a more comprehensive concrete basis. And we outlined those parameters when we talked with the different experts, and they said these numbers are obtainable. You're not going to be able to just put waterproofing membrane and floor. You're going to have to put sound deadening material, whether it's some sort of proprietary brand or cork. So it is a doable thing, at least when we talk with the flooring experts.
The next one deals with design review, which essentially was focused on aesthetics as a topic, but the intent of this change is that they focus on a variety of considerations, not only aesthetics, which includes safety, noise, and other parameters. So this is essentially strengthening the design review committee, which, if I'm correct, Jasmine, operates independent of the board to a large degree.
Yeah, the committee is appointed by the board, but it's its own body that governs an architectural application process. So if someone didn't like the outcome of a design review committee, say they rejected part of your application, then you have a right to appeal to the board. But that's a statutory right.
Okay, next. So this deals with insurance, and the discussion about this is, why do you have something if you're not going to enforce it? Which is what this is about. This is about protection for the community, for people that either don't get insurance because they pay all cash and they don't have a lender require it. Some lenders may not even require it. Most lenders do. The issue revolves around things that may occur of a catastrophic nature predominantly, not an earthquake, and it has to do with loss assessment predominantly. So if the example I used, I think last time, is a car at 45 miles an hour in El Segundo hits one of the units along Ocean, goes through the fence. Actually happened recently. They just took out landscaping. They didn't actually hit a unit. But if that's the integrity of that unit, please correct me as I'm going through this, and that structural integrity represents an expense to the entire HOA. For a person that doesn't have loss assessment coverage, they're getting away scot-free, while the rest of us are paying for it. So loss assessment protects
discussed it, I thought, well, oh gosh, I still think we're better off with this than without it. Some good people will look at this and say, oh, I better have insurance. Some will say, screw it, they'll never catch me, I won't do it. But I would imagine, I guess my assumption, that we would have more people with insurance if we have this in place than if we don't.
Yes.
So, before Brad and Victor have to leave, we have one more item, I believe. This is the aspect of what it takes to approve an amendment or change the CCNR. Currently, 67% of the entire association of 513 units, with 517 units. And that equates to 347 people have to vote in favor of this. That's a pretty onerous number, and one that we're recommending be changed to 50% plus one. And I'm gonna ask Jasmine and Brad to comment, because you probably have more experience knowing what communities are moving towards, if anything, on this.
Yeah, so I'll start and then maybe, so interestingly enough, over my last 10 years at PMP, we have probably seen, I would venture to guess around 20 associations that have updated their CCNRs. Most all have had the 67% provision. Most have not hit the 67% provision, and as Jasmine can speak to, what happens in that case is that they take it before a judge anyways and ask for 50% plus one simple majority, the courts to go ahead and approve the amendment. I will tell you that in every case, that's what was done on the CCNR work that I have done. So this change really is already an option for the association. If the association doesn't get 67% plus, 67%, but they get a simple majority to take it to the courts and have the courts go ahead and approve it anyways.
Yeah, and just know that's in the civil code, it's section 4750, if anyone wants to look it up. Any association board has a right, if they don't hit the super majority, in this case it's 67%, some it's 75, some it's 90, it just depends. There is a statutory relief valve, if you will. It says, well, if you can at least hit a majority of all owners, not a majority of those who vote, but a majority of all owners, to approve an amendment, then you can petition the court, and the court, in my experience, having gone through about 100 of these petitions, only in 2 cases has the court ever declined the petition, and those were for procedural issues with how the votes were conducted as opposed to the substance of the amendments. So it is highly likely that if the board says, oh, we need to go into court for this, a court will approve the amendments. And so lowering the amendment threshold to what the statute already allowed the board to go and petition the court, most of the communities that I work with who are larger, like 360, elect to go to a simple majority, because even that's a real uphill battle to try and obtain. Voter apathy is a pretty big issue in most communities.
And it saves it on attorney's fees.
Yeah.
And I know that some may draw a parallel. I know to change the Constitution of the United States, you need ratification by 3/4 of the states. Now,
But that doesn't mean 3/4 of all but United States citizens.
But it's not 3/4 of all United States
Correct.
citizens, and so we're talking about affirmative votes.
Yes.
Where and I imagine if we even had a simple majority of all registered voters pass any law, it would never happen.
It would not happen.
So let me ask Victor if he has any comments before he leaves. I know Victor and Brad have other commitments and need to be heading out of here at about 8:30, which I think we're at. So Victor, any closing comments on your part?
I just want to reiterate to you guys that, I'm here to try to help you guys. With any questions, should you guys have any questions or any concerns, you're welcome to stop by my office, you're welcome to give me a call. The purpose of me being here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, is just to assist you guys, explain to you what lenders look at from a risk perspective, whether it's Fannie Mae or whether it's an overlay that banks will have, or whether the target's always moving, right? Good times, nobody really cares, but when they start seeing decline in values, you know, these guidelines start getting tighter and tighter. So again, whatever you guys decide on, essentially, just make sure that you're not deciding for the now, but make sure that you're deciding for, you know, the future as well.
Do you have an economic forecast that suggests
I
what
first
we're
of all,
in
I
will
forgot the
continue
battery in it.
for?
You know, a lot of the economists are saying that they give this market another couple of years, that we're due for a correction. Not chaos like in 2007, 2008, 2009, but a simple market correction, because as rates increasing and as values are still increasing, national average 6.5% year over year, you know, it's making it so that some people are getting priced out of the market, or just, you know, with interest rates increasing, and which means mortgage payments are going up, less and less people are qualifying. So there's going to be a correction, whether it's a 5%, 10% correction, but it's definitely not going to be a nosedive like it did in 6, 7, and 8. But they say it's around the corner, probably a couple of years tops.
Ray, closing comments?
I would just say that in my experience, these amendments are pretty typical of what associations have been working to amend in their governing documents. These aren't new to me. I'm sure they're not new to Jasmine. These are pretty typical. As far as the rental caps go, this is a direction that a lot of associations are moving, and they're really moving in that direction because of the story I told you earlier, where someone's trying to refi or someone's trying to sell. And it's tough as an owner when you get told, wait a minute, your sell's not gonna go through, or your refi is not gonna go through because the rental percentage is higher than the banks have an appetite for. And so that's why a lot of the associations are looking at the rental caps, saying, you know, we wanna be conscientious, that we want people to be able to rent their units, but we don't wanna get to a threshold where it's going to impact owners' abilities to refi and sell their units. And so it's something that most associations are looking to do to protect the owners, the members of the association. So.
Great point, Ralph.
So I'll ask the board for any comments before we go to the open forum. I'm gonna take a chance this continues to work. It's a crapshoot, but for those of you at home listening, I've been behind the camera and hopefully will continue to work.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Thanks, you guys, I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks, you guys. Have a wonderful evening.
I'm gonna skip around for like 15 minutes and then I'll slow down.
Okay, that being the case, we have our open forum. Please line up. You have 3 minutes to ask a question. We ask the one question, and then you go to the back of the line if you have successive questions. Or state, yeah. It doesn't have to, yeah, go ahead. You get up there.
Alright, so I'm speaking to you guys tonight to make a plea attempt to protect our community investment, just like I did for 9 months, for those that don't remember, back in 2014, to get the board to pursue the construction defect claim that they were vehemently opposed to at the time. Market economic forces have resulted in an approximate 20% rental rate, 360 without any rental caps. Other gated communities in close proximity to include Fusion, Parkside Village, Manhattan Village, and the Terraces all have 25% or less rental rates and do not have any rental caps within their CCNRs. In addition, only Fusion requires a 30-day lease or greater, while the others have no restrictions. These amendments would make us the most restrictive anti-renter and anti-investor gated community in the immediate area. In addition, the Terraces would hold significant advantage over our units, given the ability for investors to purchase there without these restrictions. Finally, federal lending guidelines that were talked about earlier for owner-occupied units are not impacted by the community rental rate as documented on the handout that we provided to you. One owner recently claimed that Fusion is at a 50% rental rate and that their property values have been depressed as a result. I have data I can provide to you that proves otherwise, to include multiple units that sold at least twice in the last 5 years. Their appreciation has actually been faster than ours. Their price per square foot is faster than ours, higher than ours for the smaller units. We're actually selling at a 5% discount. Similar data was found, and I attempted to provide it to the board. They were not interested in seeing it at the time. The builder delivered buildings, as we talked about, were delivered with sound transmission deficiencies. There was a 2012 test, I'm not sure if you're aware of, I have it with me tonight, where 3 units that were tested failed to meet 55 FIAC when solid surface flooring was used anywhere in the unit. The proposed transference is especially troubling given the board spent $450,000 replacing landscaping and irrigation using construction defect funds, while our individual unit life safety and fire code issues remain unfixed, such as drywall and paint. I'm unclear why the board would put the onus on owners to replace the flooring when there was construction defect money available and the sound issues were included in the construction defect claim. The lease addendum is also troubling. Just to let you know, small violations such as a tenant putting their swim trunks out on the balcony, for example, in sales before, from being able to do a short-term lease back to stay in your unit post-sale as you're trying to find your follow-on property. The proposed CC&R amendments, in my opinion, do nothing to combat the Airbnb violations, which the board confirmed are based on false premises provided by other folks without data. Transfers responsibility for builder defects from the HOA to homeowners despite a significant settlement to repair these items, and represents a monumental transfer of property rights from owners to the HOA. I strongly oppose it.
Next.
Or do we want to?
So I just have a question, which is why we cannot vote on each item individually, because there's a vast difference between these different provisions. So that's my basic question, and also it's ironic that when times are good, the rent cap is liberal, and when times are bad, it's more conservative, because when times are bad is the time when owners are going to find themselves underwater and have a need to rent to survive economically. So that's a concern of mine. But basically I want to know why we can't vote individually.
I'll address that one. In my experience, again, I've restated and amended hundreds of documents, and I've generally seen that all or nothing votes are more successful than the amendment by amendment votes, where someone may only vote for or against the one amendment they really love or they really hate and not address the other ones. Brad may have a different take, but it was just based on attempting to try and get these amendments, if people were going to vote for them, then getting all of them to the finish line, as opposed to one or two.
That, we have heard that comment, Martha, on many occasions. And again, the process of what will happen is we will take this internally as a board tomorrow evening, discuss various aspects of what's in the amendments, and there may be some changes we make.
And it wasn't part of your question, but you did mention the idea of hardship. You could be in a position where this could be a financial hardship. This is why we added that provision.
Two things to speak to the rental cap. Number one, it does not apply to anyone in this room. As a matter of law, I think it's 4740. It cannot apply to any of you, so all current owners, as of the date this amendment's recorded, will never be subject to the rental cap. So whether it's up at 50%, you can still keep renting away. And having a rental cap is one of those ways to try and, over a long course of time, put a bit of a damp on it, or a buffer, because it can't apply to everybody who's already an owner.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having another town hall. I really appreciate it. It's not easy to sit up here and get yelled at. Hopefully you won't get yelled at. I'm not gonna yell at you. But there's actually only one issue I want to raise. Neil, you said it was less controversial, but for me it's a sticking point for me, and I'd hate for it to be the reason that I don't vote to support the proposed amendments, and that is the authorizing expenditure of funds for social activities and local organizations. I just think it's too open-ended and too subjective. I mean, this board is here today. We all know you guys. 5 years from now, when none of you may be here, it's pretty subjective, pretty open-ended about what the board can spend money on to, quote, benefit the Master Association. you could make an argument that a lot of expenditures would benefit, a lot of expenditures in the community would benefit the Master Association, but I'm not sure we would all wanna spend our money on those things. For example, the police department, we all voted, we all didn't vote, but this, City of Hawthorne approved increasing the sales tax in part to fund public safety issues. So we are contributing to the police department. I'm not sure why, I don't understand why we would feel the need to make additional contributions to the police department, unless we, on our own, at a fundraiser, decide to do that, which I would be happy to do that, but I wouldn't want to spend HOA money to do that. One way to salvage the issue may be to put a cap in there. I don't think any board member should have to go out of pocket to attend and participate in these functions, so maybe just put a cap in there of, I don't know, $500. That's my only comment, thank you.
One thing, how do you address Kyle Portman?
The first part of that amendment for that article. In other words, using funds for outside, I think it says nuisances?
Yeah, which is the whole dust issue with the state.
Well, okay, I'm just looking at C, I'm sorry, just
Okay.
subsection C.
So you're okay with B?
I'm okay with the nuisances, yeah.
All right, and Tim, thank you, we've heard that comment as well.
I'm here, actually, I'm an independent mortgage lender, and I'm here to give you another part of the equation with respect to the occupancy, which I know is a hot topic. And I know Victor is a reputable lender with Bank of America, but the owner occupancy percentages do not impact lending at the moment. There are none. If you are purchasing a unit in here with the intent to occupy it, the percentage of rentals in this complex does not come into play. So this is with both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I don't feel like that was necessarily conveyed. He was accurate, I think, in everything he stated. And I'm sure Bank of America has their basically own guidelines that they impose, but that's definitely Bank of America. If anyone's got this handout, it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those are the two purchasers of conventional loans across the country. They do not have a requirement. I also listed two other major lenders just for another perspective, Citibank being the biggest. So if someone's doing a jumbo loan, they also follow Fannie Mae. So even there's another type of loan, and they follow the same guideline. Caliber Home Loans is another one. They've got a lot of portfolio programs, jumbo loans. They also follow Fannie Mae as well. So there's no occupancy requirement. So I thought that was important to know as you're making a big decision, just in understanding that at the moment, there are no occupancy requirements.
Thank you.
It is at the moment.
But any of those lenders could reserve the right to change their rules
If
and
there's
they
no-
don't
They
know
could,
it.
absolutely.
And if we were upside down.
Let's get online and make our statements or
Yeah.
questions,
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, in kind of response to that, I think we heard Victor say much of the same thing, 5149, and the key word, I think, is at the moment. So project, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and there's another board in place. Maybe 3 of those people are people that own multiple units and maybe want to do something downstream with buying a future unit, and they vote with their wallet as opposed to what's good for the community when the numbers perhaps come down. So we're looking forward, but that's not the motivation. The motivation is what the community is asking.
So the 5149 is for investor loans only.
Okay.
I can clear that up.
So I want to thank the board for having, I know I've been a little bit recently on Facebook, but I have my opinion.
Facebook, what's that?
Yeah. And in the spirit of agreement, I have no problem with the provision to remove the requirement of the board to sweep the streets, so. That's the only one. So, a little bit about my background. I was a former director for 4 years. I'm an attorney. My experiences, I was an attorney at Latham & Watkins, one of the largest law firms in the world. Prior to that, I was a law clerk for Judge Diane Sykes on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. I have read through this amendment in depth, and what is unfortunate, I appreciate the 1.5 hours that we've spent so far, but what we have not heard are the burdens on each homeowner. Every single provision in here, besides maybe the street sweeping, takes either imposes an obligation on the homeowner, grants authority to the board, whether it's their intent or not, it affects that, or it does a combination of both. And for the life of me, I can't understand this because I have seen no empirical evidence to support why are we going to put this encumbrance on our property. And whether you're grandfathered or not, the encumbrance will be on your property in perpetuity. When you sell your home, every prospective buyer gets a statement that says this is a rent-restricted community. On the cover of the CC&Rs, legal counsel has advised that you should put on the cover of the CC. That's how insignificant this amendment is. On the cover of the CC&Rs, this is a rent-restricted community. Fusion doesn't have a rental cap or anything. It doesn't have the residency requirement, doesn't have anything. Parkside Village doesn't have it, Manhattan Village doesn't have it, and the Towns doesn't have it. Not the Towns, the Terraces, which creates a conflict if you live in the Towns and you're in a bidding war. If someone's interested in your unit and someone in the Terraces, you're probably going to go where there's fewer restrictions. I think it's important about the lending standards. We keep hearing if the market goes down. The market goes down because there are fewer buyers. If you start putting these restrictions on when you need buyers the most, they're not going to be available because they can't buy it with an eye maybe renting it one day. Maybe it's a family that comes in and says in the future, oh, that'd be nice to own, we can rent it in the future. Two other things, and I don't know what my time is, so if I go over like that. All right, hardship exemption. This board, I don't believe, has any ill intent, but imagine they're your worst enemies, because that could happen. They have 100% discretion to deny every hardship exemption. In one of the articles that was sent to me, it says, I'm going to keep going until I get told to sit down. And
I'll volunteer.
okay, to tell me to sit down?
Yes.
I appreciate that. On the hardship exemption, one of the articles says, when they grant it, they can actually condition it and say, we'll grant it to you for a year, but at the end of the year, if you don't move into your home or sell it, you lose the exemption. That is one of the things that has been conveyed to the board. Darryl, I can go into that. If I have another minute, I can talk about grandfathering.
Cycle through. You can come back.
Okay, you can come back. Next
Or just stand there.
I have a quick
question.
question. Just trying to understand the cap as far as if the current owners are not part of the cap, does that mean that, let's say for instance, October 1st, it's effective? Every 4 new units, only 1 can be rented? Is that how it's calculated? Or are you looking at in total? Because if you're looking at in total, that does affect the numbers, because every new unit that gets purchased cannot get rented ever because the cap's already fulfilled by the existing people who own homes here. Is that, I don't know if I'm not understanding that.
No, you are actually correctly understanding it. Number one, the cap rate, right now, I think the data is maybe 21% of the units are rented, so there would be 4% of the units that could still be rented. And once that cap is reached, you're right, a new buyer could not come in with the intention of renting it out right away. Now, it's possible that the rental cap goes down at some point, and then the new buyer could rent out
Or
the units.
conceivably, if 80% of the people who have owned the property for the last
10 years.
well, should be only 8 years, but they could conceivably all rent, and then that cap could never come to fruition. Is that?
Yes.
Correct. It could be like 60%. If we, all the owners right now, decide to rent ours out, that cap could go to, the cap doesn't play. We
So
could
it's
have
not
a
just of the
60%.
new purchases,
Yeah.
it's the entire.
Yes.
Yes.
So it does, that could affect value.
Although they could go on a waiting list, but they couldn't do it right away.
Right.
Because realistically, we could be at a, if like, as years pass, we could get to like a 50-60% just on the current owners.
Easily.
Yeah, well, what like we saw with the flyer, but other than.
a lawyer, and I am not a real estate agent. And I appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate the work that you do. My wife and I moved here from the fine state of Maryland some 5 years ago. We got fortunate and lucky when we found 360. Our original idea was to find a home, work till we retire, and then find a place to live. We found everything right here in 360. We are owners. And I, for one, my personal opinion, and my wife's too, is we are very much in favor of a rental cap. I personally believe, and no offense to anybody else's beliefs, that you maintain integrity, that you maintain a sense of care, and I'm not saying renters don't care, but you do as an owner. When you own something, you seem to care about it a little more than if you're just borrowing it and paying someone to use it. I'm not crazy about grandfathering everything because it just seems to me that 25 will become 40, 45 real fast. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I, for one, would like to see a parking fee for renters. If you want to rent, that's fine, but don't use our spaces for free because we have enough problems finding parking now. And if you live here and if you rent a space, you rent a unit here, then you should pay for the space you use, just like all of us. There should be a renter's fee. So that is my piece. Thank you very much.
The board will not address rental parking fees or parking fees.
So, I live next to Airbnb, guy. And I can tell you, business is booming, okay? And the board has done a spectacular job to try to shut him down. He owns 2 towns, one next to me and the one across Coral. I won't tell you exactly where. And he's got people in there just about every weekend. And what he's done is he's got the lockouts at the bottom. He has the end units. And he keeps those as his primary rentals. He also rents the one next door to me, all the upstairs room. It's not clear if he's even there most of the time. I see him come and go a lot, but don't see him there a lot. And he's even gone as far as in the garage, in that unit, to create a laundry room for the tenants. So the problem is they come and they go all night long, all right? They come in the middle of the night, and how many of you have the hurricane locks on your doors? None of you have the towns? Nobody's here towns?
We have hurricanes.
Well, you know the hurricane locks, right? The pin locks at the top and the bottom, you got a ring pin lock. Well, if you have them, the first time you go to open or lock the door, it's really hard to figure out unless somebody shows you how to do it. So, you know, the worst part is during the middle of the night, people trying to get the doors open, trying to get them closed, and the hurricane locks. So, then there's the smoking. He tells his tenants they can't smoke inside, but he doesn't tell them they can't smoke outside either. And so, you know, nobody's here under 18, right? Okay, so, you know, a couple times I've gone and I've said to people, hey, you can't smoke here. And, you know, what do you get? Fuck you, or go fuck yourself. Not words I like to use frequently, but, you know, gotta tell it like it is. So, what do? You tend to ignore it, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then, you know, there's a bunch of us that keep searching the Airbnb. We find his sites. I mean, I think he's used 20 different names. He puts his rentals, he shows them over in Fusion, he shows them in other places in Hawthorne, but the pictures he doesn't change.
30 seconds.
Okay, and I'll get back at the end of the line. And, because I haven't gotten to the best part. So, you know, so I got a 16-year-old daughter, I got a 13-year-old daughter, I got a 10-year-old daughter. Some of these guys have even approached my daughters and my daughter's friends to the point where they've had to come inside. My son's always playing outside in the driveway with his friend. They've approached the kids, and that's where it just gets wrong. So, you know, my 4 rental cap, yeah, we gotta have some sort of control over the people that we allow in. I mean, I bought here because of the rules, and I read all the rules before I bought, and I really struggled with some. All right.
Back in line.
I get to the end.
You can sit right there.
It gets better.
This set of amendments flies in the face of that. If we want to take a step towards negotiation, we can. If you want to believe in a rental cap or disbelieve in a rental cap, but you're right. This does provide a rental cap, maybe 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. So if you want that, that's fine. I'm not going to argue for or against rental cap. I will argue. You vote yes on this, you accept everything else they put in it. Everything. The Davis Act that they bring up, 50 plus point, not mandatory if you read it. It says, unless otherwise defined, majority would be 50 plus one. Our majority is 67, and it should be. This is our Constitution. It should not be easy to change. It should not be led by a mob, which is 50 plus one. So think about everything that you're agreeing to when you agree to these methods. Allowing them to pass construction defects off to us. We bought defective homes. You might not like noise. No one likes noise. But you shouldn't have to pay for it when it wasn't built properly. You shouldn't. We want to give them the first step towards dictating what we can do inside the walls of our home. They control, the board controls the outside of our homes and the grounds, not inside our four walls. You want to take the first step in with the noise? You can. But where does it stop? What about the lease amendment? What right do they have to put a rider at the end of a lease that is not defined at all? So again, this is our Constitution. Why should we put things in that are subjective to whoever's on the board? Everything should be locked down, not subjective to the 5 people that sit there. So think about this. It's not just about renters. Renters are good or bad. Airbnb, this is a shit for Airbnb. Nothing. All right? It's not Airbnb. Who cares? All right? But think about what you're agreeing to. Renters, are they bad? Maybe. Tenants, are they bad? Maybe. Owners, are they bad? For sure we got bad owners here. Kids, are they bad? Sure, they screw shit up all the time. What's next? How many kids can we have here? How many new owners can we allow in? Think about it. You're taking steps in because renters are bad. It's fear-mongering. Don't allow it to happen. Think about what you want and make sure that you know if you vote yes, it's for every single thing that they put in. You know where I'm saying.
If no one else wants to go, I had one more thing I wanted to cover.
I got one.
Sure.
Sorry.
I have a quick question. It has to do with the flooring.
My question has to do with the flooring. Does it only apply to the condominiums or does it apply to all the units?
All the units.
Hmm?
All the units.
All the units.
That's what it says right now.
Yeah. Okay. Your charts didn't say that. Okay.
It was initially towards the flats and the lofts, and then after the first town hall, the board changed it so it would be applicable to all the unit types.
Yeah, my question was also about the flooring. The way I was reading the amendments, it sounded like if floors are non-compliant with the sound insulation, then, and you sell a unit, that the new owner has to replace the floors and bring them up to compliance. That's correct?
No, if it's builder installed floors,
Builder installed floors, and
Correct.
if the amendment needs to make that clear, that builder installed floors are just not even governed by this.
Okay, well, the amendment should make that clear because it makes it sound like,
It would be
it also makes it sound like if there's noise complaints about the floors, that they have to be brought into compliance. That also only applies to non-builder installed
Correct.
floors.
that was our intent, we'll clarify.
Yeah, because it, when you try and sell a unit, if the new owner has to replace the floors once they buy it, that could really hurt resale value.
Understood.
Thanks. I'm going to go real quick. Wanted to mention one thing about grandfathering because we heard a lot about that. And I think that might be one way to get some owners comfortable with passing this amendment. I am not sure, I don't believe, maybe it's wrong, I'm not sure the board actually believes in grandfathering as a principle. It's in there because it's required by law. The law that requires it was enacted, I believe, in 2012 or 2013. I will also note that the board's attorney calls the law, Adam Sterling, on their website, calls the grandfathering provision ill-conceived. If it was up to them and they were advising, you wouldn't even have that, based on the way I have read it in there. I want to talk about Airbnb. Everything you're asking for is currently in our CC&Rs.
Exactly.
There's a 30-day restriction, and they cannot use the home as if it's a hotel, motel type thing. They're not enforcing it. You have an enforcement problem. You don't have a legislation problem. One other thing, I think John Capillero, he put out a really good statement that I would encourage everybody to read, because the two motivating factors for the rental cap that I've heard is we don't want a lot of investors coming in and renting it out, and we want credit lines. And he makes it pretty clear. Credit availability is not a real issue. Fannie Mae, as you've heard, their test is it has to be greater than 50% occupancy, owner occupied, in order to extend money to investors. If you're not an investor and you're over the 50%, you can still get money if you're coming in owner occupied. So Fannie already has a mechanism that controls the rental issue. The last thing I'd like to point out on John's statement is he even makes the point, for people coming in the market that has set this community, these are not great investments from a cash flow perspective. And he said most of the people that he has seen that have rented them are people who bought it, outgrew their home, retained it, and moved on. This is gonna scare those people off. I don't think anybody who has an eye of maybe renting their property one day is going to want to purchase a home in which it says we have these rental restrictions. Property is the fundamental tool by which people move from the middle class to a high and acquire wealth in this country. It's the fundamental way you do it. That and starting a business and selling a business. And being able to rent your property is integral to that. And I don't think we should put these types of burdens when we're going to be the only community in the area that has anything resembling this. Thank you.
Anyone else first? So just follow up on a few things that I said earlier. I am a little concerned, and maybe the board will address this, and I would appreciate we talked about possibly changing the grandfathering provision within 5.3.1 for the flooring. I will state the way that it currently reads is that if there is a nuisance noise issue that cannot be resolved by other means, then the flooring has to be brought into compliance. That's the way that it currently reads. I can tell you again that there are people from the 2012 test, which again I have here today. It was done by William Lyons trying to prove that they met the 45 FIIC, which is what this place was built to. For some owners that were complaining about it prior to them turning over the property and walking away from the HOA, their tests show that in any of the areas that have hard surface flooring, the FIIC is 51, 52, or 54. So, and the other issue that I find that I think the HOA needs to address is an FIIC, if you know how the test is conducted, it's reliant on both the source location and the flooring in the source location, as well as in the receiving location for the sound. It's a stacked unit up down. If the receiving unit, and I have the empirical data, if the receiving unit has solid surface flooring on the bottom, then the FIIC rating goes down, right? Because you don't have a carpet pad to absorb that and not reflect it. And the question is, at what point do you assign that blame to the upper unit? At what point do you assign that blame to the upper unit versus the lower unit if they both have solid surface flooring that contributed to that issue? So I think that's something that the board still needs to resolve. To Anthony's point, I agree that I don't think the board would have included the grandfathering in if it wasn't required by Civil Code 4740. Adam Sterling did call it out as ill-conceived and said that the California Association of Realtors interfered in the process and stepped into the HOA industry, and that it should have never happened. But they are required by law to do it, so they do have it. Some of John's comments, I will note in the handout that was provided there, there's 4 pages, which are mostly assumptions. The areas that Anthony was referring to where he sort of counters what the HOA is going after were for some reason left out of that 4 page. If you want to see, he posted it to the webpage. His opinions are on there and are accurate for what Anthony was saying. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is to the previous gentleman's point, as far as ceding our property rights. I will tell you there are some places, some HOAs, and I'm not saying this is the intent of the HOA currently, but we are up to the whim of the 5-member board and the majority going forward in the future. There are some locations in Florida where when you own a property, you can't sell a property without the approval of the HOA, period. I've had friends that have inherited from their family members. He's 2 years into trying to sell the property. The HOA won't allow him to sell it. They won't recognize him as the owner. It's transferred to him by will. And as such, he has no rights whatsoever. So the HOA is not trying to do that with this amendment today. That's not what I'm claiming, but we are starting down this slippery slope.
Any other questions, statements?
I got a quick question. So, what happens if not, something happens to me and my wife and my property goes into a trust? What happens in that case?
It's exempted.
I'm sorry?
It's exempted.
Okay, so
Trust with inheritances.
Trust,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. So what happens?
you retain your rights as owner.
Okay, whoever manages the trust can still rent it?
Yes,
So if my children inherit the place, can they still rent it?
yes.
So we need to make that clear.
that's-
Yeah.
Huh?
If they inherit it.
Those are intentions.
But if they
wanna
inherit
rent
it and
Oh,
then rent
yeah.
it.
They're not, maybe they don't wanna
You
live there.
can't live there for children, by themselves.
As written today, if you're at the cap, they can't rent.
Correct.
As written today, they changed it. They are excused from the residency.
That's not correct.
No, it is correct. I've read it 14 times. The rental cap does not have a grandfathering for inherited property. Once the title changes, if we are at the cap, they cannot rent.
Well,
They have an exclusion from the residency requirement, which has an express exemption.
but
Okay.
you can just leave
Yeah,
it.
the restrictions apply to 12 months in the other.
So we'll put that in there.
That wasn't our intent, but thanks.
Yeah. That'll be,
Well noted.
it'll be addressed.
So without getting into too many more of the details on Airbnb, it states, okay? The simple fact of the matter is, I thought about selling mine a number of times just because it's such pain. And everybody here feels my pain. They really worked hard. I mean, the guy is clever. He's come up now, his latest thing is, they're all his employees and he doesn't rent them. He lets them stay there. Now, let's be serious, okay? We all know it's a lie. He's got a cottage business. He's making a lot of money. And the thing is, if not him, why can't I do it? Why can't you do it? Why can't you do it? Why can't you? Why can't we all do it? He's getting away with it. He's justified the existence. And the bottom line is, the more people we have in here renting, life is getting bad. makers, there's rule followers. If you're not a rule maker, you should be a rule follower. If you wanna be a rule maker, be a rule maker. So, you know, he sits there, he got argued, really in your face. And he basically admitted he doesn't know the rules. And that's part of the fundamental is, you know, what Anthony says, it's great because I wanna drive that bad buyer down the road. I want good buyers. And we all know, every unit that comes for sale is selling. Tasha, you know, they're selling a bump.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're getting good buyers. Let's keep it up, okay? Let's get more buyers, less renters. Better community. I can keep going on.
I'd like to ask the board a question. Can you please tell that gentleman how your amendments that we're voting on solved everything you just talked about?
Can't solve everything, but if it can solve two or
Can you solve one thing that he just talked
This
about?
amendment doesn't address those points.
Exactly,
There are
exactly.
existing rules.
Thank you. Exactly. So to go back, we're giving up a lot of our rights when the problems we have, our people sometimes are just shitty people. They are. They're not just renters. They're not. We really, and I'm sorry, Facebook people, if you're watching me. Some people that live here that are owners are not good owners. They're just not. This is not going to solve any of that. What this is going to do is terrible, terrible things to us. It's going to take away so much of our rights. It's ridiculous to solve a problem that we haven't even heard of.
What kind of rights? Tell us more.
Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Here we go. Here we go. I have.
You're not going to engage in debate back and forth. If
Okay.
you want to ask a question,
That's
come
fine.
here.
That's fine. I'm not going to answer your question, but I thought of something I should talk about. I should probably explain some of the rights. Maybe this is taken away from me. If I want to acquire wealth, because I have a small family, what if I want to grow and I want to keep this as part of my wealth? I might be grandfathered in. Does it explain how long it's grandfathered for? No. Does it explain the process of hardship if I should pass? Does it explain exactly how the hardship works? Nope. What if it wants to be rented then? There's a lease amendment that they get to impose on it. Has anyone seen it? Does anyone know what it says? Does anyone know if it can change? Nope. So again, we're not addressing any of the issues that is being brought up. We're solving a problem that we're making in fear for renters. Yes, renters can be bad, but so can tenants, so can owners. So let's stop talking about all this bad stuff that happens by the pool. Bad stuff has been happening there for a long time. A long time. It's not all renters. So please, I appreciated your stories, and I feel bad for you. This doesn't solve any of that at all.
So,
Full disclosure, I'm Neil's wife. I've sat here quietly and I've listened, and sounds to me, and the way I interpret it, is lawyerese that comes up with, the one situation that might not fall under the rules easily. And I want to say, this board, and I know these people on the board have worked extremely hard. They've listened to the residents. They've asked questions of the residents. And I support the amendments. I might not agree with every single word in the amendments. I don't agree with every single word in many of the laws of our land. But I support the laws because it is the rules that we have a civilized society by. And I want a civilized place to live. And if it's not going to be civilized, it's just not as appealing of a place to live for me, I would think for many future buyers. And that's just my personal opinion.
so, Leon, you want to say
Yes, I have lived here for only a year and a half. I've lived 77 other years. And I can hear these gentlemen and our Airbnb buddy here. And I just heard one thing that was said, hardship has not been defined. I challenge you to give a hardship definition that will not be challenged by someone else. Or how do you make up some of these things that this board is trying to do for the benefit of us? And I think there should be a claim for it. I, for one, when I look at the item that you talked about and said it's going to be on the cover of everything, it's a rental controlled, I love it. And I've been a renter, and I would love to see it's a rental controlled, rental cap controlled area. So anyhow, I appreciate your things. I don't agree because I think you can find something wrong with everything that is ever said. These people have been trying to do things. The community that I've found here in a year and a half is a wonderful community. And some people want it to not be that wonderful. I don't know why, but I appreciate what you're doing, and I say, please keep up the good work. I realize you're not going to be here forever, and there are board members who are really not good. But I don't know how you legislate against that, or how you come up with something that won't make that true. So anyhow, again, I appreciate your work. Thank you, and good luck.
So,
May I have 30 seconds?
30 seconds, because we have closing comments and we're stopping at 9:30.
30 seconds. Couple comments, and I've heard it a couple times about me speaking legalese. I am not proposing one word of legal language. I am not proposing one word of legal language. It is the consequences of what they are proposing.
So, go ahead. This is it. Virgil, you want Virgil's last one?
It'll be quick, I just got in from business. But I'm not an attorney. I don't know a lot of legal, but what I do know is that I have dealt with people that live here that are not renters, that I have had issues with a lot. But what I can see from what I hear and read and everything is that everything seems to revolve around this renter's cap. And it's fine if that's what you guys want, but in the amendment entirely, I believe that there's a lot of ambiguities, and as it stands right now, I feel like if something happened to me, I would know I wouldn't have to go ask, can I rent it or anything like that. Me saying yes to the amendment is limiting me where I'm not limited now. So there is no process. I kind of go through my mind, I have a daughter, she's 13. I had brain surgery, my husband has seizures. So for me to sign off on an amendment and say, let me give up some of those rights, and hopefully the board that's in place likes me, that I can then ask, hey, you know what, we're gonna have to need to rent this, can you please allow me to do so? I don't have to do that right now. So I'm looking for the security of my daughter. She is more secure the way it is now than if I said, yes, I'm gonna vote for this. So renters cap aside, those ambiguities, those unclear things that I'm signing yes on are too unclear, and it does not make my situation better. So if those things were defined, we can reassess, but as it stands now, it's not fully clear how that would be, and I really don't wanna stand and say, please, can you guys, let me rent because now the renters cap or any of that. As it stands now, I don't have to do that. So for the security of my children or my child, it is better for her now than if I were to guess.
Good evening. I guess the only thing that I really wanted to add, we've heard a lot of really good comments, both for and against. There's a lot to go over. And I think the only message that I would ask for all of the members of the association to consider is read them, understand them, double check all the facts as best as you can. And in the end, vote. Whether or not it's a yes or a no, vote. Because I think the important thing is to understand the consequences of this thing, but also the intent about whether or not we want to be an active community. If the message is that this thing doesn't pass, but we get a quorum of votes, then I think that's an important working result for the board to understand whether or not this needs to be pursued ever again, or perhaps it does pass. But please, vote. That's the only request that I have.
So we are right on schedule. It's 9:25. The board knew this would be a passionate topic. In my mind, I'm not sure if it's much different than parking was 3 years ago, when we talked about hang tags and lots of other things, but there's clearly a lot of passion here. The board knew going in, we can't satisfy all the people all the time. So we gave it our best shot. We'll take a look tomorrow night at the potential edits of this, and we would ask you, as Virgil said, all to vote. Thank you all for coming, and appreciate it.
That's probably true for one of you.